Excited you could join us today. We are going to be covering the mysterious art of startup PR with Josh Inglis from Propllr and Heather Farr-Edwards from Reverb. Josh will be bringing an agency perspective and Heather an in-house perspective, and I'll let them introduce themselves properly shortly. We'll be covering what PR is, why it's important, how to sort of go about it in the early days, and then we'll get into some other questions. Please submit your questions as we go. We'll refer to them, and we'll have plenty of time for a sort of AMA format. So please get your questions in. Before I introduce the other panelists, just want to run through a couple of housekeeping items for Midwest Tech Connect. So thank you to everyone that signed up for that. We'll be sending out an update email to everyone this afternoon with a bit more information here, but we're going to give the investors a few more days just to finish going through the startup applications. There's obviously a lot of you out there, which is great. And then startups, you'll get an invite to log into our scheduling platform mid next week. You'll be able to see who sort of opted to meet with you. You can review them, opt out of any meetings you don't want. And as you said before, if you don't have any matches, we'll follow up with some next steps. And if you have more matches than we have slots available, we'll follow up and connect you via email based on mutual opt-in. Thank you again to our sponsors. They're surrounding me, but NGE, TriNet, Signature Bank, Objective Paradigm, Calculated Risk Advisors, and Carter. We will be sending a survey out for feedback on this session after the fact. So appreciate if you take 30 seconds to complete that. We're trying to keep improving here. And hope you can join us for our B2B sales session on Friday. And then next week we have risk management and hiring and diversity. So I hope you can join that. And so with that, let's get started. Yeah, Josh, would you like to introduce yourself? You're on mute.
What a good start. Thanks, Jonathan. I did that so no one would hear me swallowing my water. Thanks for the introduction and for having me here. It's exciting to also be here with Heather from Reverb. My name is Josh Inglis. I'm the founder of Propllr. We're a public relations and content marketing firm focusing on startups. To us, our clientele generally shares most or if not all of the following DNA. They're founder-led, they're innovative, they're growing, and they're at a spot where we can have a big impact on their business. That's really what we look for when we're looking for clients. And what they come to us for, whether it's our PR services, which is what we're talking about here today, not our services, but about PR, or about content marketing, they come to us to help them build trust, credibility, and awareness in their industries. Obviously, most startups are earlier stage. They're doing something new and different. They're not as well known as their bigger competitors or the legacy players. And so it's just really important for them to quickly establish that trust and credibility and awareness. There are 12 of us at the company. We're based in Chicago loosely now. We could be based anywhere, I suppose, in the future. And been around for 9 years. And just most of our clients probably fall in the same region as the attendees of this event. Chicago is certainly strong for us because that's where we are, but the Midwest has been very big, Columbus, Minneapolis, especially other markets, but we've had clients from around the country and even a few other countries. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Heather.
Great, thanks Josh. My name is Heather Farr-Edwards and I handle brand communication and PR at Reverb, which is the largest online marketplace dedicated to buying and selling musical instruments. So our community is made up of hundreds of thousands of buyers and sellers all over the world, ranging from, you or I, or your local guitar store, or even rock stars like Billie Joe Armstrong from Green Day, selling everything from guitars, synthesizers, mics. If it makes music, you can buy it or sell it on Reverb. So Reverb launched here in Chicago in 2013. I joined the team in 2016 to build out the internal PR function at the company. And since then, we were actually acquired last year in August by Etsy. So, good ending or next beginning of our story. And then about myself, I'll just add that before I came to Reverb, I worked at a large PR firm called Edelman, where my clients were largely B2B tech clients. So that ranged from, then startups like CleverSafe, which was acquired by IBM, to, larger, more established tech companies. So I'm happy to answer questions, obviously based off of my experience at Reverb, but also just being in the tech industry for a while. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So as you can see, two very experienced people. So please get your questions in and we can get the most out of this session. So PR is one of those, I think, expressions that, everyone says it, but, what does it actually mean?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I talked about why people come to us, and it's for trust, confidence, and awareness, to build that in the marketplace. And that's really what public relations, that's what it delivers. So to me, that's kind of what it means. But sort of at a more tactical basis, public relations is a variety of things. It's media relations, and that's what most people think of. So being covered in whether it's TechCrunch or a local publication, an industry trade, Business Week, you name it. So media relations, and that's the bread and butter of most PR firms, and that's true for us. Certainly 80 to 90% of our work is in that area. But then other public relations activities might include award nominations, which can be really impactful for young companies, especially in the credibility side of things. So award nominations, speaking opportunities, fewer and further between a little bit, although virtual events like this one are perhaps a sign that that's shifting, and people are figuring out this virtual conference approach. And then the other would be analyst relations, and that generally falls more in obviously in the B2B software world, the Gartners and Forresters and IDCs of the world. But again, 90% of PR for us at least, and I think for most firms, is probably media relations. Heather, I'll turn it over to you. I don't want to this could go further and further, and I know we want to make this sort of all about questions and maybe shorter, pithier answers. So I'll turn it over to you now, Heather, and we can keep this moving.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo, sort of what you said in terms of, I really look at it in terms of the awareness and the credibility. I think the awareness piece is probably the most obvious. You want to get your story in front of current or prospective clients. But really for startups, the credibility part is huge. You're trying to convince people, whether that's current customers, prospective customers, investors, even potential employees, that the service or the product that you've built is the real deal. It's different from the competitors. It's going to change the industry. And I mean, you can talk about that all day, but it, holds a little bit different of a weight when you get that story told through a third party. So, as Josh said, that can range from, an article in VentureBeat that tells your story and gets it in front of potential investors to even, a customer case study in a trade publication. Trade publications are really, I mean, I haven't worked at any company where there hasn't been, a set of trade publications that are really crucial. And again, that's not just to get in front of a really targeted audience, but also to tell stories that you can then, hand to your sales team, and they can put it in the signature of their emails. They can send it to clients or prospects that they're talking to, really showing people that, other people believe in your company too, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I feel like the first time a lot of early stage startups think about it is, we've raised a round and we need to put out a press release now. And actually that's almost too late, and there's always so much more to be done.
Yeah, and one real quick, I also want to add to sort of explain what it is, and sometimes it's helpful to say what it's not, because we do hear this a lot. And in fact, I have a sort of a PR brief in front of me from a prospective client, and they talk about their objectives, and it's increased sales, increased leads, and all those things. And that can certainly happen, and that can certainly be a result of PR. But PR, what we found, PR is best when looked at as a layer, air cover over everything else. PR doesn't it can bring in sales clearly, and it can bring in investors, it can bring in new resumes, but really where it works best longer term is if all of those groups, the sales team, the recruit, the HR team, et cetera, if they're using PR and the results of the PR to help them do their jobs better, to help make a conversion page convert better, to make a let a salesperson sort of get in the door easier. So it's not a replacement for sales. It's not a replacement for HR. It's really just best as air cover for all those things. It's just an important thing for people to be aware of, I think. Otherwise, and maybe this is why, but a lot of times people are disappointed by PR efforts because they do have this idea of like this article's going to come out and we're going to have more business than we know what to do with, and that can happen, but it's not as common as one would hope.
Got it. And Josh, I know you run the I think it's Here's How Marketing Conference, right? So you have this PR and then marketing, and then Heather, your role extends beyond just PR as well. So how do you distinguish between what marketing is and what marketing is doing, and then what PR is and what that's doing, how it sort of feeds into each other?
I'll touch on what Heather shared, and PR is about that third party extending their reputation to you, basically letting you borrow it, if you will. And so if a company says, hey, we have the best IoT solution for manufacturing, that's marketing. If IDC puts it in a report and says it's the best, or if Fortune does a case study about its use by General Motors or Tesla or something, then in those cases, that's a much more trustworthy thing. So PR, it's taking that marketing message, but putting it in a much more trustworthy wrapper for a lot more credibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, in terms of the separation, marketing, you think largely in terms of your own channels, so email, social media, PPC, and PR is really about, I mean, they should be speaking together and you should be saying the same things across. I mean, especially for a small company or a startup, if you're spending time on, a piece of content that you're putting on your blog, absolutely you should be sharing that with the PR team to see how they can extend those messages. And at the same time, I mean, I think, we've been finding more and more that our PR team at Reverb also has a lot to offer back into the marketing team in terms of being the people who are constantly reading the publications, understanding what's going on in the industry. Marketing can get really wrapped up in what they're doing and stay in a bubble sometimes, and really being able to provide some context of what's going on in your industry, what your consumers are saying, what the publications are saying. So they really do, feed off of each other pretty seamlessly.
And that's an interesting way to look at it too, because if you think of and I don't do straight marketing, I don't do advertising or AdWords, and so social media. So there's certain things that I'm not as fluent with because I'm not in it day to day. But one thing that I know that we do as PR people, and Heather, I know actually we used to do PR for Reverb up until when Heather joined, because they had so many immediate needs, like quick turnaround stuff, where having an outside agency sometimes can get in the way. Small things that, it's not worth bothering the agency for, but hey, Heather's right there, so I can bring it up to her. But one of the things that I think having someone who looks at PR and a way to look at it, a way to think about it is, it's not just about the company and its space. It's like the company, its space, and then the world around it. And so much of what we do now is about COVID, or it's about the presidential election. It's like, so we have a company that does battery technology, but there's a presidential election component because energy is a big part of the platforms. And so it's paying attention to these other things and looking for those sorts of opportunities to insert your client into the dialogue. Versus an ad campaign, maybe that's just trying to go after a particular type of buyer.
That's great. So I think I understand, PR and the landscape, why it's important now. Public relations, like media relations, obviously relations are important here. So how do you even go about starting to build these relationships with these sort of outlets? You're on mute again.
No, that was a mistap. it's interesting because that was one of the first questions here. I see that someone asked, but it's also the question that we felt like we should have prepared to answer. So I'll just sort of jump into this, and I would invite anyone on this. My email's josh@propllr.com, and Jonathan will probably share it with people. I'm happy to talk to anybody afterward to go deeper on certain topics if you'd like to. But so the R in public relations and the R in media relations is relations, and or in PR and MR is relations. And so if you think about relations, whether it's family or friends or a business partner or a customer, you have to get to know that person. You have to treat them with respect. You should look at them as more than a transaction. And so that's the first thing that we advise, and that's how we approach things, is to really think about, I'm going to go into this with the right intent. I don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to treat them as a number. I don't want to see them as an opportunity. I want to really build a relationship. And so there are three parts to it. There's research, which has to be done. There's then the management and the building of that relationship. And then there's also the understanding of relevance, so that you can be a source for them where they know, like, hey, whatever's happening in the world or in the space, I know that group can be a source, or that person can be a source. On the research portion, the best way to do it is, or what research does, and by research I mean looking into a particular reporter, trying to make sure you know who you should be going after. That tells that reporter you've done your homework and they're not being spammed. There's no quicker way to turn off a reporter than to have them think that they're getting a pitch that everybody else got, or that they're getting an email that everybody else got. So thankfully, it's pretty easy to find good candidates, and most PR firms don't want to tell you this. They want to tell you they have like all these magical relationships and everything that turn into amazing coverage. But most early stage founders, and we have a ton of DIY content, PR content on our site, most early stage founders can be doing a lot of the PR work on their own, and then maybe hand it off to an agency later. But so the first thing to do is understand, you want to start building a list. And we typically say, just start building a list of, say, 10 reporters. Don't think big. It's not creating a list of 50 or 100 people, but who are the 10? And it might be, like Heather talked about, trade publications. If you're B2B software for the automotive industry, you should know all the automotive ones, or banking or insurance or HR. You should know those. You're going to have local publications, the ones just in your backyard. And if you're not Silicon Valley or New York, and the backyard kind of wants to support you, they're not going to write puff pieces necessarily, but they want to know about you. And then the other part would be the tech type publication. So if you are selling AI for retail, you want to go to publications that care about AI. They should know about you as well. But just think of a list of 10, and maybe it's a few in each of those categories: local, trade, and whatever your technology angle is. And so go to the publications that write about those things and just do some keyword research. See who's writing stories about those topics. Do some research into your competitors in those spaces, or complementary businesses. See who's writing about those. Go to your competitor press pages. See who has written about them. And what you'll find from doing that is you're going to pretty quickly get a list, that list of 10 to start with. And now you can just go out and start building the relationship. Part of building that relationship is getting to know them and what they cover. We recommend creating bookmarks for each reporter's author page. And most of the time at most publications, if you click on their name in the article, you'll see everything that they've written. And just go in once a day or once a week and just sort of see what they've written. And if it resonates with you, don't do this for every article, because that's fake and is not about building relationships. But if you see something that's a really smart take, or a dumb take, or you have something new to add, or it's just really well written and enjoyable, engage. Share it on Twitter and include the handle of that reporter. Send them an email. Most emails are pretty easy to find now. And just start working on building that relationship over time, and that can really pay off for you when you're ready to share something big: funding news, new product, new customer win, case study, what have you. And then the third part on relevance, this is where, okay, you've introduced yourself to the reporter. Well, why do they care? Like, it's nice, hey, it's great to know you, but why do I care? What is it? What's in this? What's in it for me is what the reporter might be thinking of this relationship. So that's when you should start bringing them stuff, bringing them ideas, and not always just about you. It might be, oh, hey, this, I just saw Joe Biden put this in his plank. I think it means in the platform. I think it means big things for our space. Here's where it could work. Here's where it could stumble. I just thought you might find this helpful. So having a dialogue where you're not just always updating them on you, but you're sharing ideas of what you're seeing in the space. And then that's how you become this really relevant, highly relevant contact for them, where they can feel, hey, this person has their finger on the pulse of what's happening in this space, whether going back to that original example, whether that's AI or the local tech scene or an industry, for example.
That's great. Super practical. I appreciate it. So, I mean, if I'm sending ideas, to a reporter or comments or feedback, should I expect to reply every time, or I imagine they get inundated with emails?
I've been talking a lot. I'll let Heather jump in, but I do have an answer, but I'll let Heather get some time too.
I mean, I would say actually you would be surprised how many times a reporter will reach out to a really genuine email, right along the lines of what Josh is talking about. Like I've seen, in a past life at agencies where, we send story ideas, we have an idea of somebody we want to connect the reporter to, silence, and then as soon as we send an email, 2 lines, hey, reporter at the Wall Street Journal, I saw that you just wrote this article on, in my case, it might be like, this musician who just passed away. They were really important to me, and I think you really, covered their essence really well. I love that you mentioned this one song that I don't think that many people give her that much credit for, that sort of thing. Like a very genuine complimentary email. I would say like the response rate to those, of course, not if you're sending one like every other day or every week, but like a very genuine once a month, maybe once every 2 months email like that gets a response much more often than you think, because all of this advice that Josh is giving, not all PR people follow. You would be surprised the amount of PR people who have a list of 100 reporters, they have a pitch, and they just blanket send it to everybody on that list. And that is just not a tactic that's going to give you any type of meaningful results. If you would spend instead, time researching 5 reporters in the way that Josh was just explaining, creating an email and a pitch that is just specifically for each one of those reporters, take the same amount of time you would have took blanket sending on the 100 list, the chances of getting something back, if it's well thought out and you're actually offering them something, that's of interest to them, are just much higher.
Yeah, and one of the things also at the outset, many people and startups especially, I think, there's a real desire the first time I reach out, and this is probably similar to reaching out to an investor like you, Jonathan, like I want to tell my whole story on my very first email. And that's something we really advise we try not to do it internally. And I certainly advise any startups that I talk to and counsel on PR, I tell them not to. And what we call it at Propllr is hi, not bye. When you're first introducing yourself, you're just trying to say hi. You're getting on the radar. Hey, and that urgency that Heather sort of shared in her example is something we try to use a lot, where it's like, hey, I just read your article and I had to reach out. My name is so-and-so. We have a company in this space doing this. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening. I hope I can be a resource for you. Like, it could be that simple, a few sentences. You'll probably get a response from that. Hey, great to hear from you. I look forward to keeping up. Hit them up, hit that person up again. Pay attention to what they're doing, read their articles, follow them on Twitter, engage, sort of build a list of all these reporters you're following on Twitter, so you can stay on top of things easily. But then when you re-engage on something interesting that you've seen or something they've read, that's great. And you sort of build that relationship. And then when you have news, they already have a familiarity with you. There's a trust because there's been a good connection and good relationship. And so then you'd be like, hey, I've reached out to you, we've gone back and forth a few times. I've been dying to have news to share with you. I haven't wanted to waste your time, but I actually have really big news now. they're going to pay attention to that. They may not bite on it, they may not run something, but that's how you're going to get their attention. It's by priming that pump. Think of a drip campaign in an email or a digital marketing. It's sort of like a drip campaign, but one built on authenticity, not just on repetition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of analogs between this and reaching out to investors for sure. A mail merge blast out to 100 or 1,000 investors is not going to get a response like a custom pitch. Heather, how do you even decide, what is newsworthy, right? Every bit of news you can't, try and get coverage for, I imagine. So, how do you really pick and choose?
Well, I do think, one benefit of me being within the company and kind of on the ground is that I can just poke my nose into everybody's business and, get people comfortable with, tell me everything. I'll figure out what we need to do with it. Just make sure that I'm aware, of everything that's going on. And then really, I mean, in terms of like, reaching out to a reporter and you think of like the pitch, there's kind of this like Venn diagram of, okay, on this side, this is what I really want the reporter to know. And then on this side, this is the type of article that they write and how they write and the elements that they usually write. And you have to meet somewhere in the middle, on a piece of information that looks similar to things that they've wrote in the past. I think Josh mentioned, looking at competitor coverage. I think for startups, that is like one of the smartest things you can do early on to see how they're getting covered and understand, what's really making their story pop. I think a good example I have from a couple of years ago now, I was just doing some research on the marketplace Poshmark. And obviously, or maybe not obviously, Poshmark is a marketplace for buying and selling clothing. And they were getting a lot of press a couple of years ago around highlighting, these really like juicy success stories of, someone who just graduated college, they were looking for a job, but on the side, they're selling, X amount of clothes on Poshmark and kind of making a living out of it. And so I saw that and I said, we have that story. It's not clothes, it's people who are buying and selling guitars to supplement their music careers. So, I saw where they were covered. I even, in one instance, there was a CNBC reporter who covered a Poshmark case study. And I reached out to that reporter, same day, said, hey, right in the upfront, I mean, Josh talked about, making sure they understand. In any pitch that I send, I try to answer the question, what are you trying to tell me? And why are you reaching out to me specifically as soon as possible? Because if they can't understand what does this have to do with me and my publication, it's getting deleted. So I was really upfront in that email. I said, hey, I just saw your article about, this woman who makes, whatever amount of dollars a year selling on Poshmark. I have a really similar story, but it's about a rock star, and showed like how it was a different story, but showed how, I know what you already write. And so I'm giving you a story because it seems like you write about, individuals who are able to supplement their income in interesting ways, that sort of thing. So that's, I think in terms of like understanding, stories that are interesting, a good way to kind of help you narrow it down is to see, what the areas are that your competitors are focused on.
And real quick, I want another example, also Reverb related, because it's the founder, David Kalt. So this was actually before he even launched Reverb. He owns the Chicago Music Exchange, and it was his experience with that guitar store that made him launch Reverb, another story. But I was reading a Business Week, and a freelancer had a story in Business Week about a Chicago record label, a Chicago startup record label. And I reached out to that reporter and I said, I just read this article, and I don't know if you covered it because it's Chicago, because it's music, or because it was a startup, but I have another one that's all three. And I said, David Kalt, CEO, blah, blah. I gave him the details and he goes, oh, let's talk. And 3 weeks later, there was a one-page profile of David in business, or whatever it was, a month later. in business week. It's like that urgency, that connection, it works. It really does. But don't try to sell everything on your first email. Hope it happens, but don't, take it easy. Slow down. You don't want to be the Unabomber with a big manifesto the first time you reach out to somebody.
Sure, sure. So for the early stage startups, I mean, how do you even know you're ready to start doing this? You know, what's the right time to start thinking about doing this and start investing like time and energy?
Well, again, so PR, DIY PR, you should do it immediately, I think. Even if you don't, like Robinhood famously had, what, 1 million customer signups before they even launched. A lot of that was through PR and people, the buzz that was created around it. Now, most companies are not Robinhood, just as most startups aren't Google or Facebook or, you know, Uber. But there is a lesson from that. And so I think if you're very early stage, maybe you don't go to, actually, I would even say if you're very early stage and you know what you're building, you could go to that and say it was an automotive IoT, like the example from before. You could go to the automotive person and say, hey, it's too early for you to care about me, but I wanted to be on your radar. This is what we're doing. This is where we see this opportunity. This is when I expect to do something within the next 6 months. We expect some news, something like that. Locally, local reporters want to know what's going on before it happens. Hey, want to get on your radar. This is what we're doing. This is why it's going to be big. And this is why Chicago or Minneapolis or Columbus or wherever is so important for this space. And then if it's IoT, you go to IoT people and say, hey, I'm starting this new IoT thing. It's an undiscovered space. It's sort of, I think I found this opportunity. Nothing to report just yet, but we expect big news in 6 months. If you can start priming the pump before you need to like have something happen, that's when you should do it. And you know what? You're probably the expert at IoT. You're probably an expert in technology in that world. And you're probably an expert in a local startup. So you're still a good source, even if you don't yet have a product. So I would say start immediately. Just don't expect anything immediately.
That's great. Heather, we've got a question here from Christine, talking about engaging a PR firm versus an in-house team for PR and best practices under each scenario, I guess, in terms of identifying, recruiting, working with. Can you talk to both sides of that?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk from the sense that I was at an agency before I came in-house. At Reverb, we now have just the internal PR team. We don't have outside agencies. That's not to say that we never would, but I can kind of talk, and Josh, I'm sure, can talk to this as well. I mean, like I had mentioned before, I think the benefit of somebody being inside the company, and this can happen in tandem with an agency as well, but the benefit of really having somebody on the ground who is, thinking about PR, or I mean, I understand, startups, it's a small team, maybe PR is a third of what they do and 2/3 is something completely different. But somebody who has that, as their goal is able to really be boots on the ground and hear things that are happening, because you can't expect everybody in the company to know what's a good story, to know what's PR worthy. By the time that they think, oh, maybe this would be a good story, it's probably too late in the time that they've told it to you. So really having somebody who can, be there to listen, but also be somebody who can kind of feed information to, I think that that's really beneficial. I will say, in terms of the relationship building aspect of it, working with an agency, you do, and I don't know that people necessarily think about this so much, but you do benefit from the fact that the agency you work with works with a lot of other clients who are likely in your space. So you kind of benefit from that network that they're building. So obviously Josh's PR firm, is pretty hyper focused on a specific type of client. And so you might get, the residual effects of that if it's a conversation that's already happening, or, they're trying to build relationships with reporters and, reaching out with their breadth of clients. So that I think is really beneficial. But, you do have to consider, I guess, when you hire that agency, who's going to be the person that's the contact within the company, whether that's, the CEO, or whether it's somebody who's more focused on marketing and comms, and really making sure you're giving them what they need to be successful, because, they're not there on the ground to hear all the things that are happening.
Great. Josh, any other thoughts, and how, how can be done really cost effectively? Obviously budget is tight always.
Yeah. And so, when we I talk to a lot of early stage founders who say, hey, we're coming out of beta, we're ready for PR or something, you know, hey, we just raised, you know, have some angel money and we're ready for PR. I tell people what I just said. Yes, you are ready for PR, but you should not hire a PR firm. You probably shouldn't hire someone internal yet. Just as I think founders need to do a lot of the things in the company before they hire someone to do it. They should sell before they hire a head of sales. They should market before they hire a marketer. They should, if they're a developer, they should be developing, et cetera, et cetera. So too, I think with PR, it's something founders can do. They're in a good position to tell their story. Reporters, the PR agencies don't like you to know it, but they like to hear directly from founders. They'd rather hear from you in many cases than from a PR firm. Just because they feel like it's that immediate connection. So if as the question of like hire internal or external, I would keep it, and I haven't really thought this through, but I want to, and this is probably going to become a blog post. Internal when you're just getting started, and it should probably be the founder or someone like that. And then as you grow, let's say you get a seed round, maybe, and we'll work with seed companies, but only typically on a project basis, just don't get the news out of the funding round. They've spent so much time and attention raising that money. They don't want to spend more time and attention figuring out who to pitch and how to do a press release and all this stuff. Just pay someone to do it. But don't continue that program. I don't like the idea of PR being a big chunk of the marketing spend, like a disproportionate size chunk. And it's different for different companies. And then maybe at Series A, that tends to be where we get involved. There's a more significant, it's sort of there's more money in the bank. There's probably some product market fit. There's a marketer or marketing team. There are other marketing activities going on. That's the best time, I think, to bring in a marketing or a PR firm. And then where Reverb was, we have so much stuff going on. It's also a consumer play, which I think makes it a little different than maybe a B2B type company. I was 100% in support of the decision. I mean, I would have happily stayed on without Heather joining Reverb. I wouldn't have like pounded the table to tell them to hire someone internally, but it made all the sense in the world then for that company. And so each company is its own thing, but yeah, other than that, I would just second what Heather said about the pros and cons of each. Oh, I guess one other thing, if you do bring on someone, I don't know if this was a problem with if Heather ran into this, but we have seen people who are brought in and they're going to be like the PR person, but they're probably also the best writer. They're probably also maybe kind of a creative type person. And so then it becomes really hard for them to be the PR person every day. And if you're not the PR person every day, you're probably not going to be a very good PR person in terms of productivity and results. And I don't know if that was something you ran into, Heather, or not, but I think that's a real risk about bringing it in-house.
Yeah, I do think that generally a PR position can mean a lot of different things. This wasn't my experience, but I know a lot of other companies within Chicago, tech companies around the same size, you know, they're the PR person, but they also write the blog, but they also run the social media. And I think you just need to be, you know, pretty clear about what those goals are. I do think, you know, when you hire an agency, obviously there's a contract and a scope in place, so you know exactly what it is that you're going to get out of that. But, you know, if the goal is to have somebody who can kind of shift as the company shifts, then maybe that's a positive in terms of an internal comms person. But we have a decently large marketing team at Reverb. So when I joined, you know, I really was able to focus specifically in on PR and the PR program.
That's awesome. Heather, I'm guessing now, I mean, if you're doing any sort of cold pitching of journalists or whatever, it's probably not coming from the CEO necessarily, given, you know, your focus on this. But early on, is it better to have the founder or CEO reach out? We have a question here from Laura about this. You know, or does it not really matter who's actually doing the outreach?
I mean, so I speaking from my experience, at the point when I was brought into Reverb in 2016, you know, I was doing the coordinating just so there's kind of one central person that everybody can go to. But there were instances like maybe our top, I don't know if I want to put a number, but like our top 5 reporters from a local standpoint and from a trade standpoint, where like it's really important that they feel really good about our relationship. So if I was getting ready to reach out to the editor at our top trade publication, I might instead, you know, draft up some bullet points, send it to the CEO and say, hey, could you reach out to this editor because we have some news coming up, like just to help make them feel, you know, better about the relationship with the startup. Because there is a little, like, you know, Josh talked about local publications like to get in on stuff early. There is, like, you know, they feel good that they have that connection, especially if the company continues to be, you know, continues to grow and be popular. There is a little bit of pride from those reporters with having those connections. So I think, you know, when it comes to the people that you're frequently reaching out to and the people that are really crucial from a trade standpoint, yeah, I mean, I think it could make sense even if you have a PR person in place.
And I would say, and I think it just has to be natural. Like if the CEO hates doing it, don't have that person do it. If they love doing it, have that person do it. If you as the PR person have built a really great relationship with that reporter editor, you should do it. So really just sort of, I think it's on a case by case basis, but certainly by default, I think the local, the trades where like having that, especially for B2B, having that sort of that founder connection, I think can really help build some goodwill.
Yeah, interesting. I guess to some extent, it's really a personal relationship you're building, but equally you need to sort of make it a little bit portable across the organization as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got a question here from Nicole, Josh, just to follow up to your your first hi email to the reporters.
Mm-hmm.
And if they come back and say, thanks, look forward to seeing what you're doing, would it be acceptable to add them to like update emails that go out? A lot of startups will send out perhaps a monthly or quarterly update.
Yep.
Or is that not good?
No, I think that's great. I've often wondered about this. I don't know if that investor update email is the right one.
Mm-hmm.
There is an idea of precedent. So if you're sharing customer numbers and then all of a sudden you're not sharing it anymore, what does that mean? Why did you stop? And so think about the kinds of stuff that you're comfortable sharing. Normally you can share, you have a client win or a prospective client and you want to tell your investors or stakeholders about it. That's a different thing than talking to a reporter and saying, hey, yeah, we're pitching, we think we're going to get Chase Bank for our new AI product. It's a very different kind of audience. And so I would be a little hesitant on that. But yeah, certainly send updates, but they could just be bullet pointed. Hey, I want to get back in touch. Some of the things we've done, we landed 4 Fortune 500 companies, or we have 3 in the pipeline. We just rolled out the second version of XYZ. We're building out some really interesting client case studies. Like it could be something super simple, a few bullet points. But certainly, yeah, keep them updated, just keep it going. And then once you're really ready and you feel you're ready for prime time because you have a great customer story or you have a big announcement, it's just much easier at that point if you've already built that relationship.
Right.
Yeah, and I think in that specific example, in terms of, you sent the first hi email and they responded back and said, great, really looking forward to hearing from you. I mean, they're just other people. You can be upfront with them like, great, would it be okay? I'll plan to, you can tell them what you're planning to do. Okay, great. I'll plan to keep you updated anytime something big happens, or like, would it be okay if I sent you some news from time to time? Totally understand you're probably not going to cover each one. Like you can be upfront about that. It doesn't have to be like a coy thing.
Right. Yep. Yeah, great. And I had a question here from Jason. PR versus social media. So where is there alignment, overlap, or potential channel conflict? You mentioned earlier, I think, trying to get everything working in harmony. So how do you think about that? And how can PR be used in social media and perhaps vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you obviously want all of your channels to be, singing from the same song sheet. Essentially, I understand though, something like brand guidelines or like a brand strategy is like a nice to have for a startup, especially when, the team is really small. I do think though that there is something to be said, I guess, specifically in talking about media relations and how your social media channel can be helpful there. Like even in some of the things that Josh has been talking about in terms of building reporter relationships and tagging reporters. I mean, your official channels can do that too. I think, reporters today are, just held to a lot of different standards than they were before. They're wanting clicks, they're wanting social shares. So like you're helping contribute to their success when you do things like that. I mean, again, though, it goes back to, the difference between your own channels and your channel, the channels that you're trying to get on that are more third party. And certainly you want them to be aligned with each other, and just keeping in mind that the people that you're trying to reach out to from a PR standpoint are also keeping their eyes on those channels as well. So yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but
and I would say also, this is not really to answer the question, but it relates to social media and PR, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier. So as you identify the reporters you want to build relationships with, you don't even have, you should probably follow them on Twitter, but you don't have to technically follow them. You can still create a list of reporters in AI or target reporters, make it a private list. No one wants to be called a target. And you can add them to your Twitter list, and then look at that list, look at that feed once a day or so and see what people are saying. So that's part of it. The other part that I would say is people don't generally, except for really clever corporate social media handles or ones that have a really passionate following like Reverb does, most people don't want to engage with a brand. They'd like to engage with a person. And most reporters certainly, I think, would rather engage with the founder or the head of PR at that brand than the brand. So keep that in mind also when you're trying to connect and do things with that reporter. Do it from your own account if you can, if that's allowed, if you have one, or from your founder's account versus from the company one. That way you'll also be much more likely to see a reaction immediately, and then you can act on that reaction. And then one of the other things with social media, as you're building that relationship and that engagement, you're showing support of those reporters. When you see an article that they write and you share it, not about you necessarily, but just one in general that they write, include their tag. Don't include the publication. No one's monitoring the publication's social media feed or mentions, but the reporters do. With the exception, I mean, if you're Aaron Griffith at the Wall Street Journal, or at the New York Times rather, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of followers she has. She doesn't notice any notifications probably, but most reporters do, especially local, especially trade publications. They'll see, and they may not respond. They'll typically favorite, like if you put in their handle, they'll typically at least click a favorite or say thanks. But again, it's just that drip campaign over time, but keep it real, keep it authentic. Don't do it for every article they write. Just do it when it really actually connects with you in some way.
That's great. And yeah, it seems some reporters are much more sort of engaged and active on Twitter than others, but as you say, everyone loves the exposure. And you made a very important point, so I'm just going to repeat it. Add people on lists privately, because suddenly you get a notification like you have been added to, PR target hit list. Like it's a little bit
yeah.
So yeah, that's great. And then Josh, you mentioned got an anonymous question here. Award nominations being an important part of building credibility. So how do you feel about pay to play awards?
They're almost all paid these days. But there's a pay to play and then there's a paid. So Inc. 500, you pay. I think it's a huge moneymaker for Inc. That's why they moved it from 500 to 5,000. Because with the Inc. 500, they probably had 1,500 people or 2,000 companies thinking they might qualify for that top 500 in growth. But now that they moved it to 5,000, they probably have 10,000 that are applying, hoping to be in it, and everyone pays them a few $100s. It's a huge moneymaker, and thank God, because media outlets need all the help they can get. But that's no different than Ernst & Young has the Entrepreneur of the Year award. It's not a moneymaker for them per se, I don't think. But it's certainly, at least directly, like I don't think they're doing it for the revenue of award nominations, but they're certainly not doing it just out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because all these really great companies are sending in their financials to E&Y. It's like it's the greatest sourcing trick ever. The Deloitte Fast 50, exact same thing. So a lot of these awards, there is a financial component. It is a revenue model for those publications, but that's okay. Now, if it's a professional awards thing, like, what's the one that I see all the time? There are some that all they do is awards, and they do all these different categories, et cetera. I think people look at those. If I see a company promoting, and I wish I could remember this one award and I just can't, but if I see a company celebrating this one award, I kind of look down on them. Like, that's because it's bogus. It's really not impressive, and they're just trying to put fluff on their website. There are some of the review sites that have these little badges like #1 whatever. It's based on some really bad logics, and I think they just give everyone a #1 ribbon, and then everyone puts the badge, and then they get a link back to their site from all these different sites. So they're bad awards and they're good awards, and I think you can sort of sniff it out a little bit. If it's in an industry trade, it's probably pretty good and worth pursuing. If it's well known in the tech world or in the entrepreneurial world, like an Inc. 500 or E&Y Entrepreneur of the Year, that's probably worth pursuing. But if it's just a general awards company, I would probably not. I would probably default to just staying away from that.
Yeah, I think if an award company is asking you to pay money and guaranteeing any level of like, pay this money and we'll put you on our top 10 list of blah, blah, blah. Like, if it's an actual award, you're going to pay, but then you're still going to be evaluated based off of your actual achievements. There's actually a lot of publications that exist like that as well, you know, where you get an email from like CTO Executive Monthly, and they're saying, we've identified you, we want to put you on the cover. It's just going to cost, you know, $5,000 because, you know, XYZ.
Production costs.
Yeah, and that's usually a sign if it's guaranteeing some level of you know, notoriety. And I think you know, most people generally know some of the names that Josh talked about. So, you know, you got the Inc. 5000 or like Fast Company's Most Innovative Companies.
Yeah.
I think if you aren't familiar, you can pretty easily take a look at the list, who's won in the past. Are your competitors on it? Are companies that you aspire to be like on it? Or is it a bunch of companies you've never heard of? Is it getting press outside of the one site that it's on? There's a little bit of like, you know, investigative research you can do to figure out the validity.
And also, one thing I did see a question I wanted to be sure to address, because there is some confusion, and it was from Carrie. How do you get free articles or awards rather than paid? When we talk about public relations, there's no quid pro quo. There's no financial component to an article in Cranes or an industry trade publication and so on. What you may see sometimes, and they should always be designated this way, is promoted post or promoted article, sponsored article, something like that. It looks different than the rest of the publication. And almost every magazine has this. Cranes has it, Fortune has it, I think Business Week does them. And that's fine, but that's advertising. That's not PR. PR is going to a reporter and editor and pitching a story and saying, hey, this is why I think this is right for your readers, and this is why would be a great read, and then fits to your coverage. That's what PR is. So we'd never pay a reporter to do anything. If you do, it's either advertising, it might be influencer relations, where you're paying a blogger to review Reverb, for example, or talk about like their experience buying on Reverb. But again, that's not PR. It might be something we ultimately do just because they do. The impact is very similar, but just the execution is very different. One's financial, I pay you, you do it. The other is, I put together a good idea for a story and I hope you do it. Very different.
That's great. Got a question here, I guess specifically on the B2B side, but I think perhaps we could answer this more generally as well. You know, if you decide you're going to go and work with a PR agency, you know, what's a good way to vet them? And I guess I'll ask Heather first, because she's less biased.
You know, I think, again, like looking at the other clients that they've worked with is a pretty good indication. You generally know, even if it's not directly in the same industry, you generally know the types of companies you'd like to be among. I mean, I think getting a good understanding of who's part of the pitch process is actually going to be working on the business. There are instances where you might, you know, have a connection with a vice president at an agency, and then the reality is that, you know, the most junior person on the team is going to be actually doing the work, and that's great if you really like the most junior person who's on the team. But having a good understanding of who's going to be working on the business, And then, I mean, I think just examples of past results that look similar to what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And I would add, one of the things, relationships comes up a lot. And again, I was talking to a prospect the other day and they're like, what relationships do you have? And I think PR firms, and ourselves included, will all certainly talk about really good relationships I have, but relationships just they don't get you to yes, they just speed you to no. If it's a no, it's a no. So any PR firm that's pitching relationships over anything, I would probably stay away from, in part because, one, it doesn't mean yes, but two, it means maybe they've gotten lazy and they're not, most of the placements we get for clients are not based on relationships. It's a good idea. We found the right reporter and we pitched it and it worked. And so if they're pitching their relationships too much, they're probably lazy, or maybe lazy. I don't want to be mean. They may be lazy. And then the relationships are also, they might get an answer from that reporter faster, but it won't necessarily mean that it's a yes. And then once you do get that yes and you get that big piece because you had that great relationship, they're not going to write about you again in a month. Then what? So a relationship might be great. Like it might be this immediate burst of endorphins as you're so excited about the program, but then what? Does it last? I would look at, do they know, and this, I'm selling my book here, as they say in the financial world. I would look at the agency and say, do they know companies like me, where we are in our stage, where we are in the market, whatever? Do they know companies like us and the stuff that we deal with? And then go beyond that and say, and then do we like the people there? Do they have some exposure to our industry or into the publications that we want to be in? I would look at it that way, because like we focus on startups, but we're very broad otherwise. We've been in pretty much every industry at one point or another. And I think ultimately what clients come to us because we know what it's like to be a startup. We know what they need. We know how to operate with them. We know how to be flexible and transparent and cost effective and highly productive. And those are things that, not every PR firm is ready to do for a smaller company.
That's great. So we've just got a couple of minutes. I'm going to try and hit 3 questions with one here. Podcasts as a PR strategy or adjacent strategy, and speaking engagements, and then the best practice to sort of secure either or both of those.
I definitely have an answer, but I'll let Heather go first if she does.
I can give a quick opinion on podcasts specifically. If you want the longer version, we can talk later. As a consumer of podcasts, great medium, only going to get better. The amount of hours a day I listen to podcasts, even not commuting as I usually do, is still astronomically high. It's a little bit different of a scenario when you're talking about pitching in podcast stories, though. The likelihood, I think, of pitching in a story, unless we're talking about something really specific, like how I built this, like, the types of companies they talk to, you could easily pitch a company. I'm sure they get company pitches all the time, but something that's more broad, like a Reply All or like a Freakonomics Radio, like they generally know where they're going. Typically it's not in a positive direction. I don't know if people listen to Reply All on here, but it's almost always related to like an issue, like somebody's package got stolen, or like something terrible is happening in the tech industry. And like, a tactic could be, and I have done this as a fan of Reply All, and knowing that one of the hosts is an avid synthesizer user, I have reached out and said, if you ever find yourself going down the path of an article where you need to really understand something technical about music instruments, we'd be happy to help. But like the idea of us pitching in the specific story would have to be rooted in something that we probably wouldn't want to be a part of. So the tactic there is definitely more along the lines of like an expert if you need it, versus like landing a specific story. Yeah. And that is just my personal opinion, having thought a lot about podcasts, but it's still a relatively new medium, I think, from the standpoint of PR professionals.
Wholeheartedly agree. And that's a podcast at a very big end. Like if there's, I think it's like a barbell, right? There's Freakonomics over here, and then there are a bunch of really small niche ones over here. And this is especially, I don't know that I would have the same advice for consumer startups, but for B2B ones, I look at podcasts as being the new conference panel or speaking opportunity. Just like if you're at a conference and there are 50 people in the room and you're speaking, you're like, hey, that was a good conference. I had 50 people. They opted in to hear me. You know, they were already designated as like my target because they're at this conference. They opted in to hear me and they were actively engaged. Like, this was great, 50 people. And so a lot of these smaller podcasts don't have big audiences. But in my mind, as long as they're well produced and the host is good, that's a really good use of 30 minutes of a founder's time or whoever the person would be, as long as it reaches the right audience. Because it's people who have subscribed, they've downloaded it, and they're listening to it. Like they've self-selected themselves to a point of like being amazing leads for you or influencers for you to tell their friends about this person they heard on a podcast. And it's also something that allows you, I think, more opportunities as you go to these niche ones. It allows you more opportunities before you've quote unquote made it, because you're an expert on AI and banking or whatever it is. You can go in and talk about AI and banking and how far it has to go, even if you don't yet have a product with amazing product market fit and a whole bunch of case studies and all these other things PR people and PR firms like to have. So we love podcasts. Just listen to them, make sure you know what they talk about, make sure that you could be a fit for them, that they're well produced, and that the host could pulse good stuff out of the guests. But if they do, don't worry if it's 25 people on the other end, especially on the B2B world, because you'd be happy at a conference with a small room full of dedicated people. So why not a podcast?
Sure.
And you don't have to travel.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, look, we've gone over time, and I appreciate both of your time so much for joining us here. We've had tons of good questions. The ones that we haven't gotten to on the questions, we'll try and address just with the follow-up, which we'll get out in the next week or two. Just real quick, I guess, closing thoughts on any sort of additional resources that people might want to check out. And if you want people to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Heather, you want to? I'll go first since I'm talking first. You can reach me at josh@propllr.com, and it's PROPLLR. I couldn't afford the E's when we started. It's a very unoriginal name for a marketing agency, but it's a very original spelling for a marketing agency or PR firm. And so josh@propllr.com. If you go to our site, Jonathan mentioned this, we do this series of events, and you'll find Heather on it, called the Here's How Startup Marketing Conference. And it's not just PR content. In fact, most of it is neither of those things. We have Chicago's startup marketers come in and talk about things that they did very successfully. And it's just a series of rapid fire things. I think we have about 70 of these on our site now. So if you go to our site, you can click on that and just scroll through. The headlines are pretty descriptive, so you can know what's being talked about. I think that could be very helpful. And as I mentioned, our blog is also almost exclusively, we have some goofy stuff in there here and there, but it's almost always how to do this thing in PR, like how to pitch reporter, how to build relationships. In fact, we have a whole post on DIY PR. And then the other way is just to email me. I'll spend time with any founder who's looking for assistance and sort of ideas on what to do. It's a really fun part of the job.
Heather, real quick.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out to me at just heather@reverb.com. I was the first and still am the only Heather at the company, which feels good. And I would say, you know, in addition to kind of what Josh mentioned in terms of, I mean, Josh's blog is a really great resource. I think in addition to, you know, quote unquote PR resources, a good first step in kind of continued learning is just, you know, subscribing to the publications that you're trying to get into, getting those newsletters. It's going to be a little overwhelming, but even just skimming those, how that can kind of like get the juices flowing in terms of the types of stories that you want to tell or the types of reporters you can connect with, that can be really helpful as well.
Awesome.
And a parting note, I almost forgot. We've talked about trade publications, local publications. Please subscribe. They need you. Subscribe if it's important enough for you to be in it because you think it would really help your company. It's important enough to support. Trade publications are typically not terribly expensive. Local publications are keeping our democracy a democracy and presenting you with PR opportunities. So please do subscribe early and often, as they say.
That's a great closing thought. So thank you again for spending an extra 5 minutes with us. This was amazing. And yeah, thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Great week. Thank you.